Remember to subscribe to our Zoomcatchers YouTube channel and follow us on our socials. Greetings and welcome to Conversations on Aging Season 2. I'm your host, Kimberly Gunn with Zoomcatchers. Thanks so much for watching, sharing our content, and continuing to believe in the power of podcasting to make positive impacts on our world. This season, we have another lineup of great guests, many of them artists, writers, and actors, to share their aging journeys with us. Today, we're talking with Byron C. Saunders, director, actor, and civil rights advocate, and no stranger to the Zoomcatchers family. Byron's highlights and many credits currently include working as an independent arts management consultant, helping artists and arts organizations with grants, administration, and fund development. Byron has recently directed Elders Igniting Many More Stories to Tell, a Zoomcatchers production, which is 3 plays of some of Atlanta's renowned senior playwrights. Byron has served on many arts councils, including the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, and the Georgia Council for the Arts. In New York City, he was executive director of the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop from 1988 to 1990, and the workshop on his watch won the Obie Award for Playwriting Development. And so now, without further ado, we're so pleased to present and welcome Byron C. Saunders to the Zoomcatchers virtual studio. Byron, how are you doing today?
I am blessed and divinely favored. I'm realizing that I have received and been beneficial to an anointing, something that we all have. God has given us the chance to be someone special. Everybody is special. Every child born has a special gift. My gift, as I learned early, was seeing things from a theatrical view. And what I mean by that is like when you're growing up as an African American, and I was born in 1950. Okay, so I'm at the cusp of television invention, so that my visual concept of growing up was principally by way of a box, that screen that we see ourselves in. And it's so interesting because my heroes and sheroes at that time of my wonder years, as they say, was Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra. If you could imagine being a combination of Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., and every time they were on television, I was fascinated by what I was seeing. And then, of course, back in the 50s, if you had a television, it was usually black and white. Color television wasn't that much of a product of affordability. You could barely afford the black and white TV. And of course, we all had the antennas on top with the, aluminum foil to try to increase the reception. But when a black person was on television, it was cause for celebration. Imagine that. Me being born in the 50s, watching television and seeing Sammy Davis Jr., Paul Robeson. My first love affair was with Dorothy Dandridge. Oh my God, watching her in the classical piece of Carmen Jones. What an amazing story. And then seeing Harry Belafonte, every time there was a black person on television, I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be like that. Growing up in a household where my parents, see, I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. So when we talk about the great migration of blacks leaving the South and coming to the North, I'm one of those persons. I was born in Hubbard Hospital, which is now Meharry. My mother was a graduate of Fisk. Her mother was a graduate of Fisk. And her mother, my grandmother, first cousin, was the first and seventh president of Liberia. So in my DNA, it's all about freedom. My father was a graduate of Tennessee State University. So here I am, an HBCU born baby with a pedigree that I was unaware of because I'm too young to realize the history of that kind of linkage and connections where my grandmother was in the same class as W.E.B. Du Bois at Fisk University, and she sang with the Fisk Jubilee Singers. So here is the legacy of knowing and being more than just a byproduct of a plantation, a byproduct of a of sharecropping family, but being given what Du Bois wrote about, the talented tenth. My parents are the talented 10th, and they moved to Washington, D.C. They got into government. They worked with the federal government, the National Security Agency. I'm 74 years old. I have no idea what my parents did for the federal government working with the National Security Agency because of their top secret security clearance. Now, not many people can claim that, Kimberly. Okay, so you grow up in a household where you're like, in our dinner conversation, my mother and father says, we will not and ever will discuss what we do at our job. If anybody asks you what we do, you tell them your parents work for the Defense Department. That's
Wow.
it.
See, Byron,
That's it.
every time I talk to you, I learn something new and different about you. I just touch on the highlights of who you are in the introduction, and now you're whipping out all this. I'm like, whoa.
And it is a whoa moment because I'm learning as I age the significance of your family origin, that tree that you're a part of. And in our 21st century, now that we're having this major conversation about race in America, which has been for the last 400 years, since 1619, that conversation is ongoing. It does not stop. I'm inspired today by a doctor who gave a commencement speech at Clark Atlanta University a couple weeks ago in which Janice Lydell, playwright that I just got to working with, Elders Igniting, she's emeritus at Clark Atlanta University. And this is somebody who she mentored and taught, who gave the commencement speech that was so brilliant, brilliant. It was like a sermon from the Mount. And to encourage these young people who came to that place of significance to learn, to become something other than somebody's work slave, to go beyond, to reach for the stars. And it was just so inspirational. So that when Janice came back to the theater where we're doing Elders Igniting, which was on Frank Silvera Writers Workshop's 50th anniversary reading series back in March, she came in floating on air. And I was like, wow, this is so wonderful. And now I understand because this was a student that she taught, got his doctorate, and then elevated to the next level to bring in the people behind her and with him to where they're going in this journey that we call America. That inspiration inspires you, it lights your fire, so that when you get up in the morning and you put your shoes on and you get ready to go out and into the world, that you're not going out there just with a woe is me attitude, but it's like, I've had breakfast of champions this morning, and I'm going out there and I'm kicking ass, taking names, collecting checks, and I'm writing my name in the book that says I am a legacy, not
and
just a theory, but a truth.
And this is a great way to start off this conversation because you literally combine like 10 topics into one statement. And I really want to just back up a little bit and find out.
Sure.
I know that you gave your beginnings, your humble beginnings, and now we're
Humble
talking about
beginnings.
legacies. How did you go from watching the big names on the TV to actually getting into the arts?
Well, I think it starts with where you the first PlayStation. Think about this. A child's first PlayStation where you learn the dynamics of living is in your kitchen, your mother's kitchen. That's a PlayStation. And so my parents gave me and my sisters an opportunity to learn, to grow, to develop, to become yourself individually, and then bring that to the table to be a part of a village, your community. And even though I didn't know even to this day what they did, I do know this. Every time there was a conversation about what was going on in the world around us, they encouraged us to read the newspaper, have a conversation, intellectual conversation, not just about sports, not just about girls, not about the party that you went to, but can you name me the president's current administration? Growing up in Washington, D.C., that's what we did. Most people don't realize Washington is the seat of power of the world. And most people don't even realize in the country that they live in what goes on in Washington, D.C. as government of power, not just now government of money, that's New York City. But if you're talking about the what is the world thinking and doing, that was my that was my playscape, my PlayStation. And then to listen, to be a witness to when Kennedy got killed, President Kennedy, primary example. When he got killed, I was going to a Catholic school, St. Francis de Sales, the oldest Catholic school in Washington, D.C. And I was out in the seventh grade. I was taking down the flag. I come back into the classroom and the nuns are crying. The classroom is in awe and shock. And I didn't know what was going on, but I realized there was something very dramatic that just happened. And when I found out it was President Kennedy had been killed, the capital of the world was in shock. And then my dad and my mother took me down to the Capitol to see the body lying in state. And standing on Constitution Avenue and watching little John and Carolyn walking behind the caisson. That's in my mind. That's in my spirit, in my soul. That was the highest drama that you could experience. And then the loss of Martin Luther King, watching in Washington, D.C., where the riots broke out, and understand here's more drama in 1968. I'm a senior in high school, and I'm realizing at this moment in my life growth, the theatrics of what the world was witnessing was impacting on me and my family. That was my bar mitzvah. I was 13 years old, 13. And I'm growing up in Washington, D.C. And then my cousins, my aunts, and my uncles are coming to Washington, D.C. to be a part of the March on Washington. And my dad took me to the side of the day that it was happening. He said, "Son, I know you really want to go with us, and I would love to have you be there with me, father and son. But if anything is to happen to me or your aunts and uncles, you will become the man of the house. I need you to stay and protect your mom and your sisters." Now that's high drama. That's my bar mitzvah. That was the day I became a man because my father said, "I know you want to be with me, but you are to protect the family." Everything that I do from that moment to now, that was 1968 to 2024, my journey has been filled with an experiential moment for every action that I've taken and done, every job that I've had, every theater that I've run, every historical society that I've had the privilege of running. I've done it because I realize my DNA is all about freedom. The arc of my journey is all about freedom. And if I'm to be honest with the anointing and the blessing that has been given to me to have and comprehend my heritage, my village, my link to Liberia as a freed African American, that's a story and a journey that's better than any movie that I've ever seen, better than any play that I've ever directed. And ultimately, it's because if you recognize who you are, where you are, and what you're supposed to be doing in your life, you have an obligation, a moral obligation to follow that journey, engage it, live it, breathe it, talk it, eat it, sleep it, drink it. And anybody that you've met who knows me, they will always say, Byron is true to his word about being nonviolent because I am a follower of the Prince of Peace.
Awesome.
That's my heritage.
We're here with Byron C. Saunders, who is breaking it down for us. And thank you so much for joining us today with conversations on aging. We say we're never too young to
Yeah.
talk about aging. And how did you take all of those experiences and then decide to pursue a career in the arts? I know you've been a director, you
Well,
act.
yeah.
What I mean, there's I'm sure a plethora or a lot of different choices you could have made, but what was it about the arts that really attracted you?
Growing up in Washington, D.C., everything is free. The zoo, the concerts, the museums, the Smithsonian. I spent summers in the Smithsonian looking, learning, viewing, watching, reading the Declaration of Independence, going to the Smithsonian Institute, going to the Corcoran Art Gallery. I was totally surprised when I left DC in 1968 to go to college at the University of Kansas that everything else was 10 years behind where I was growing up. It cost to go to a zoo. It costs to go to theater. It costs to go to the symphony. For me, that was just one of the things that I had access to. So my upbringing and my parents giving us the opportunity to go to a parochial school. I went to a military academy in Washington, D.C., St. John's Military. It's now co-ed. But back then, that was the Vietnam War period. So, I mean, it's ultimately, these were dramatic times. And the first play that I ever did on stage was West Side Story at an all-boys Catholic high school where the girls that came from Immaculata, the other Catholic school for girls. There were several in DC, but this was kind of like a sister school, and we're doing West Side Story. Now imagine this, I'm playing a Puerto Rican. Why not? It's about Puerto Ricans and about white Anglo-Saxon people, Europeans, okay, in New York City. My dance partner happened to be the cousin to George Wallace. Yes, Alabama's governor, George Wallace. My dance partner, and she's playing a Puerto Rican. I said to her at the rehearsal one day, I said, if your uncle ever found out you were dancing with me in this particular production, all hell would break loose in your family. That's theater right there. And then, of course, from there, the next play I did at St. John's was South Pacific. And
And
then
and
when I
thus
went
the theater bug bit, right? Is that
oh, the theater bug bit me, but that's not why I went to University of Kansas. I went out there to go to pre-law and political science major. But when I realized everything in Kansas was like 10 years behind everything I grew up with, I became disenchanted. Even a story like The Wizard of Oz. My political science teachers told us to read the book by the guy who wrote it, Baum, that is that it was a study in Midwestern politics. And he's right, because the story is based in Kansas. And I realized after being in Kansas for 2.5 years and through Kent State, Jackson State, being a part of the Black Student Union, my first day of college, Kimberly, at University of Kansas, I was sitting in at a Holiday Inn protesting wages for cafeteria workers and the cleanup staff. My first day of college, I missed my morning classes to participate in a civil rights disobedient moment. And sure enough, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the KBI, came in and took everybody's picture. So automatically, I was already identified on that first day of my college career in Kansas of being a supporter of the movement and civil rights. Now, what's significant about Lawrence, Kansas? Langston Hughes grew up there. Williams and Walker of the Williams and Walker comedian team. Walker grew up there. There's elements of history in Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, which was a free state. My political career got shortchanged there because of everything that was happening around us, Vietnam, Kent State, Jackson State. I mean, the current protests at the colleges now are very reminiscent of what was going on then. Been there, done that. I no longer wanted to be in Kansas. So, like Dorothy, I clicked my heels 3 times and I said, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. I left Kansas. and my godmother convinced me to get back in school. She sent me down to Hampton, where I got in on the last day of late registration. But it was in my junior year at Kansas that I changed my major from political science and corporate law to speech and drama and theater because I was unable to be on stage in Kansas. Mind you, University of Kansas was submitting Indians to play Indians for the Kennedy Center American Play Contest. I auditioned for it. There were no blacks in that play, no black Indians, no brown Indians, not even me, who looked like who am part Cherokee. Okay. So I didn't get cast, but what I did do was learn how to be a stage manager, learn how to do makeup, learn about my face, learn technical theater, building sets, all of that. So that when I transferred to Hampton, this was like going from one place of academia to paradise, where a black HBCU was a homecoming for me, where I was able to realize this was where I needed to be to grow, to realize if the arts was something that I wanted to undertake, that these were a group of people who I could feel very comfortable with. And ultimately, to this day, there's some of the folks who have run some of the biggest theater companies, worked at some of the biggest institutions. Marjorie Moon, who was my teacher, at Hampton, came out of Caramel House in Cleveland, and she actually took us to Caramel House as the Hampton Players in my senior year, for which we did Slave Ship at Caramel House as part of a winter break opportunity, and realizing at that point, well, we were in Cleveland. It snowed every day. But what we realized as seniors when we came off of this winter break and we were going back to Hampton, what were we going to do with our rest of our lives? This is our senior year. So we decided, we, the Hampton Players, Michael Pinkney, Tommy Marks, Don Bryan, I mean, the actors and friendships that were made then, we went into the house we were staying in, which was a beautiful multi-room house, bedrooms, where the cast of the Hampton Players, men and women, stayed. And we went into the upper room, literally in the upper room of that house, and we had a meeting one evening, and we were asking ourselves, what are we going to do when we get back to Hampton and being seniors? Because the average income for a speech and drama major, majoring in theater or music or the arts, was $2,500 a year. That's 1973.
Wow.
$2,500 a year. You can't make a living on $2,500 a year in the arts. How are you gonna do that? Because everybody else will be like, well, your parents, my parents' friends. Well, when you get through with this theater thing, what are you gonna do? What's your real job gonna be? What we decided in that upper room was that when we got back to Hampton, we were going to create a soap opera, a weekly soap opera, okay, that ran Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 12 noon to 1 o'clock and call it Lunchbox Theater.
I love it.
We made the story of a family, three different families, a well-to-do black family, a middle-class family, and a poor family. And these three families met and in the middle whereas the opening episode was Jeff Bett, Linda Bett, Jerome Bett, and Mary Bett. Now, these were based on friends that were my family, my mother and father's bridge friends. They played bridge and pinochle. Okay. So it modeled a family after them called the Betts. They were called the Bunches, but we changed the name and we entitled It's a Bet. And these three families, the opening storyline was a black male who was at Amherst College, not happy being black and at a Ivy League school, and wanted to transfer to an HBCU. So the first episode was involving the male transferring from Amherst to Hampton. And then the storyline took on highlights from the everyday newspaper, But we did it because the communications department was right next door to the theater, and the music department was right on the other side, and we decided, well, if we're gonna do this and create a profile for creating a Black soap opera. Now, this is before Cosby. This is before BET. We did this and it succeeded. People would come from the lunchroom, from their dorms, and come to the theater where not on the main stage, but a little black box space off the main stage, for which we had built a small little theater that changed from one home to the other of these three families, you know, but they all interacted because they were the brother and the sister, but there was all a connection so that in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you could come to the theater, little theater in Hampton, and watch It's a Bet. Now, what was encouraging was once we graduated, because that was our senior project.
Wow.
Okay. And then then the year after that, not only did it continue, but the group that we were working with created a Tonight Show concept that was also put into the little theater as if you didn't want to watch the soap opera, well, we have a Today Show, a Tonight Show program that we were interviewing people on the campus and trying to convince the communications department that was at that moment creating its own in-house cable network along with its radio station that they were already part of. And I said, well, listen, why don't we get together and do this in the theater, have the communication people majoring in communication film it. We never got to that stage, but when I graduated from Hampton in 73, I went to BET that was then located in Virginia, and I pitched It's a Bet for BET television. What they told me was, we don't have the funds to do local originating program. So what they were more interested in was the talking heads of MTV and music videos and all that. It's just
Mhm.
popular at that time. But if you look at BET today, what are they doing? Tyler Perry, soap opera,
Right.
specials, show. I mean, it is like this was 73. Like I said, before BET actually got into before they sold it to Time Warner or whatever bought it. But ultimately, where were we ahead, far ahead of what's really grown up to be a major industry right now? When I left Hampton, moved back to Washington, DC, and I had auditioned at the Arena Stage. This was a national audition. And Arena Stage, there was the Arena Stage and several other theater companies who were sitting in the audience watching the auditions. I got offered a contract with the Arena Stage to be a intern stage manager, which was good. However, the Folger Shakespeare Library and Theater Company offered me a contract to work with the Folger. Now, to me, the ultimate of stage work is Shakespeare, classical theater. I took that contract and I was able to teach Shakespeare in the DC public high schools, where I would take a group of actors. And I went to Howard and got about 3 or 4 actors and hired them. And we would take Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth into the DC public high schools. And the teachers would tell me, listen, don't be surprised if they fall asleep on you because they're not interested in Shakespeare. And I said, that's okay. All I want them to do is watch. And I would go in with my 4 actors, no costumes, no props, just the scripts, because the Folger gave the scripts and the books of West Side Story and Romeo and Juliet. So every DC public high school, I would be in for about a week at a time, teaching Shakespeare, teaching Romeo and Juliet with actors from Howard University in their theater program to be a part of teaching Shakespeare in the DC public high schools. And then I got a chance to work on the stage that is a replica of the theater in England, is where he performed. And I did Inspector General on that stage. From there, I did mime. Yes, I did Marcel's the whole routine of mime. And I worked at the Kennedy Center on the 12 Days of Christmas, and it was the Opera House. So every time I would step up in my career, it was one more step higher, another step here, another step there. And then one of my classmates from Hampton, Elizabeth Williams, the daughter of Hosea Williams, one of Martin Luther King's 12 associates. Martin called him his Castro. He would be the one to go into a city. He was the John the Baptist that would go into a city as part of the civil rights movement operative and stir it up so that when Martin and Andy and Ralph came in, they were the peacemakers. So if you call yourself a Baptist, know who your origin is. Because at that point, then Liz said, Byron, I'm inviting you and your wife to come to Atlanta and helped me start People Survival Theater, working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And I took the journey. This is wife number one. I lived in Hosea's house. I ran with Elizabeth, ran People Survival's Theater. And then from People Survival Theater being there a couple of years, the spiritual journey itself was codified and validated in a meeting one Sunday. Hosea had a church service and where he would invite other pastors from around the country, around Atlanta. And that's how I got to work with the King family and Julian Bond and John Lewis. All these were my friends. All these were personal friends. T.T. Vivian, another personal mentor. Hosea, the bull in the China closet, as they called him. So when you think about a journey that you're on, and you're realizing from a commitment and a vow that I took in 1968, promising God, my Lord and Savior, that everything that I would ever do would be for the freedom of my people. I am a civil rights man. I am part of the movement. I have left my name in the sand, in the grave, in the dirt, in the halls of where it needs to be because that commitment has never been shaken. Now, I have to tell you, along the way, that's not always been accepted. I'm Peck's bad boy because I'd go to the city hall meetings. I'd go to the council meetings and the state legislature, both in Georgia and in New York when I finally did go to New York. But I would be the one that stand up and say, you know something, what is wrong in this system that we have is that you'll give us a little bit of money to do the art, but you're not giving us money to build the institution. And imagine when we started People Survival Theater, it was in a furniture store. And in that furniture store where you could come and get clothes and you get furniture, there was a little space that we carved out to have a soap opera. And we named it. We didn't call it It's a Bet. We took the stories that we did at Hampton and we created the new version of that idea and called it The Promised Land. And it ran for 10 weeks as a live soap opera every Friday and Saturday. And then from there, because of the success of it, we got press from the Atlanta Journal Constitution. We challenged everybody because we were saying, listen, you all are giving all the money to the Alliance. You're giving it to the Academy Theater. You're giving it to here. But what you're not giving is money to help sustain and support the African American community and its entertainment dollars in the central business district. So that our little project that moved from Decatur, Georgia to David T. Howard High School. Now, why is that significant? David T. Howard High School is in the fourth ward, which is called Buttermilk Bottom in Atlanta, Georgia. Who went to that school? African Americans. And what we were able to do, because they had this big gymnasium for where theater and basketball and everything, but we took over the ROTC building and turned it into a black box theater where we did The Promised Land. Now, The Promised Land became such a hit that WPCH, which is easy listening music as you get on the elevator, you got that nice music playing for you, and WIIN, sister stations of WPCH, was a country western radio station.
Mhm.
Warren Cromartie worked at the station. He was one of their DJs, black guy. And he came to us and he says, would you all be interested in doing radio drama? Hello. Not only were we interested, but he said, there's one thing. You can't come into the studio during the daytime because they don't want you here. You have to come in at midnight. We came in at midnight. Now, mind you, we're still in the midst of doing the soap opera every Friday. We're 10 weeks in of doing the soap opera. And about the sixth or seventh week was when we got the offer, which meant that we had to calibrate the opening to tape radio drama from midnight to like 4 in the morning. We would leave the WPCA studio, come back to work at SCLC in our day jobs, which it could be as working with the People's Crusader newspaper. That was Hosea's newspaper for the civil rights movement, Metro Atlanta Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and then have to go to work from 9 to 5, and then from in the evening on that Monday after taping your show, get ready for the next episode in the soap opera as live theater because we were writing it on Mondays and Tuesdays and rehearsing it Wednesdays and Thursdays and then doing it Fridays and Saturdays. We even had commercials from local businesses that we would
Nice.
put in. And it was like the magic of doing the theater concept, this idea. How do we talk to our people? How do we continue to tell the stories about us as a people in this land? Because Atlanta, as we know, the seat of the civil rights movement, which is one of the reasons why I went, because I wanted to experience it firsthand. I wanted to know who Yoki King was. I wanted to know Martin's family. I didn't get a chance to meet Martin. Obviously, he was killed in 1968. But Coretta, all the kids, Dexter, even Alvita, they were all my friends and I worked with them. So my whole concept of being able to communicate to the community for which I loved and give my faith and hopes and dreams to was being embellished right there in a pocket of a cultural heaven.
Mm.
So that when I left People Survival Theater, my next journey was to Just Us Theater, which happened to be the largest Black theater company in town, run by Theater of the Stars, which was a white organization, the Broadway show circuit, that every time a show closed on Broadway with the Nederlanders or the Schuberts, Tots, Theater of the Stars, would bring it to Atlanta, bring it into the Civic Center or to the Fox Theater, and then running a Black theater company for which there was an upheaval there, and then I was offered the position as general manager, then I offered the position as executive director, and then ultimately, because of the dynamics of what we were able to create and succeed as probably being the third largest Black theater company in the country, I had over 2,200 subscribers. The mayor's wife, both Andy and Maynard's wife, were all honorary chairs of my Just Us Theater task force. So I had the creme de la creme of Atlanta supporting the theater company. The biggest problem with all of that support, because I mean, I produced and presented Timbuktu with Eartha Kitt. I had the opportunity to work with the best of the best through the League of Regional Theater concept with the Lort, because when the shows came to Atlanta under Theater of the Stars, I was their production coordinator. As my mentor, Chris Manis used to tell me, he said, Byron, when they get off the plane and you meet them at Hartsfield Airport, you say, welcome to Atlanta, payday is on Thursday. Because that's the way the industry works. You have to have a reputation that people respect, bringing in the stars, and everybody's a star, but there's some who are bigger than others, but you still create and respect everyone's. I made that as part of the MO for Just Us Theater, so that when I first came on board, I directed Langston Hughes' Tambourines to Glory. We didn't pay anybody, but what I told him was, I said, listen, we don't pay you yet, but here's what I will command of your presence. I will start on time. I will end on time. And all I ask is that you come when you bring your talent to the table, work with me on that. Then, when we began to pay the actors, because we had an agreement with Actors Equity as an artist program, letter of agreement, I meant I could hire the equity actor to work with the non equity actor in Atlanta, and we paid. And I would tell them in the first day of rehearsal, listen, this is contract signing day. We start on time, we end on time, we pay on time. But if you start to abuse that, you don't want to see me anytime during the first week, except on Saturday when I'm asked my director to show me the show that I paid for to help present to my audience. That's when I would come to the first run through. Then I would know if my show was real, but work. But I would tell the actors, I said, now if you see me come in, Anytime between Monday and Friday, I'd be handing out pink slips. Don't make me do that because I don't want to. And I had to do it a couple of times. But you have to establish the esprit de corps of a professional concept that will translate to the actor who has been treated like dirt in most opportunities,
Mhm. Agreed.
which is sad because we only play the maids, the butlers, and whatever.
Right.
And in the state of Georgia, which is a right to work state, that makes it even more difficult because we're talking about cheap labor and we have to overcome that.
And we're here with Byron C. Saunders. We're talking about all kinds of things, cheap labor and the civil rights movement and so much more. Thank you so much for being on, really learning so much about you. And I did want to ask you, because I know you acted, you obviously are a director, how you made that transition, or how did you decide to also get into directing? And you have directed, you did Elders Igniting with us, and we're going to, talk a little bit more about that. But
Yes.
how did you
So
decide to, would you say that that's your focus, directing now?
producing. I love see the three things. Now, going back to Hampton, I'm gonna tell you how I actually started. I was in Tijon and His Brothers. I was in several productions in which I was the star. I loved it. But there was one show that I actually wanted to do, which was Tambourines to Glory, where I could play Buddy Lomax. Buddy Lomax is the devil. Okay. His opening monologue is like, you have to read Langston Hughes to realize what a genius he was because here's this character, Buddy Lomax, in Tambourines to Glory, who's actually the devil trying to tempt these two women who are starting a storefront church. And of course, the idea is how does he tempt them? How does he persuade them to do wrong? And then, of course, he gets his comeuppance at the end. Well, I'm on stage auditioning. Marjorie Moon was going to play the lead character. So I'm like, oh my God, I want to be on stage with Marjorie Moon. She's my instructor. And Michael Pinkney, who was my roommate, who is now just retired 2 weeks ago as emeritus, a full professor, Dr. Michael Pinkney at the University of Florida, who happened to be the youngest director to direct on Broadway when he directed Innocent Black with Melba Moore on Broadway. He's the youngest. Okay. My roommate from college. And so here I am at Hampton auditioning on stage. And before I can even say the first line, Michael in the back of the house says, Byron, can you, I want to talk to you for a second. Can you come off stage? And I'm thinking, oh my God, here's my moment. He's going to tell me I got the part. And he says, I really need you to be my stage manager. Crestfallen, broken hearted, my one chance to be the star of a show. But he asked me the most important part of that was, I need you to be my stage manager. And from that moment on, and I reminded him of this story many, many years later, because I said, it's because of you that I'm not on stage anymore. But basically because of the relationships that I created and had with those folks at Hampton, not only gave me the opportunity to be on stage, but also to produce, to be a part of what makes the play, selling the tickets, doing the press, actually sweeping the stage. I mean, and as a stage manager, you wear every hat. And then once the director is through with the show, it's your show. You're in charge. So I didn't lose status. I gained status and respect. Then once I left Hampton and came from DC to Atlanta, that's when I realized some of the things that I could direct because I had proven myself at the Folger, doing and working with the Shakespeare Company, proved myself doing mime with Arcasis Productions, proved myself doing dinner theater. I did dinner theater work. I played Man of La Mancha where I was the Monsignor. I did Camelot where I was King Pellinor. I did shows that were literally the Broadway type of shows, musicals. I was a triple threat. And then because of the success of Atlanta, I was then offered to be a member of the Georgia Film Commission by Joe Frank Harris. So for 7 years, Lou Walker and Georgia Allen and I were the black faces that helped lay the foundation for what Atlanta and Georgia has become the Hollywood of the South. I'm so proud of that because we opened the door. We took the door off the hinges And because of that and our experience and what we brought to the table, my directing acumen kept increasing because I was directing shows for Just Us Theater and producing shows for the theater company and selling the tickets and doing the box office and doing all the things that were necessary to perfect the art and the business of show business, and then succeeding beyond all expectations. Because at that point, what drove me out of Atlanta was I got blackballed for challenging status quo, for literally standing up and saying, your programs and the way you disseminate funds to our cultural community is a violation of contract law, not about the art, about a violation of contract law for set aside program for women and minority owned business. Did you know in this country that every dollar spent in the public sector has a caveat attached to it that says that they must subcontract with women and minority owned businesses? And if you are an arts organization that has not been given the access to that, you can understand why there is no more Just Us Theater, why there is no more Jamandi Productions, why NEC is teetering on the brink of disaster all the time because we can't get access to the institutional support that's guaranteed by contract law because the arts have never been mandated to follow that procedure of a set aside program. And ultimately, that's the demise of so many of our really good professional theater companies because they've never given access to institutional development.
Mm,
And I challenged that.
mhm,
And Atlanta did not respect it. And
mm.
so I left Atlanta to run the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop.
And you know what? And that's the perfect segue.
That's perfect segue.
Literally, the Frank Silvera writers
How are you going to
workshop.
get there? Right. That's how it happened.
That's our connection. That's how we connect. And you've worked with us. You've been working with us for several months now. We really appreciate
Yeah.
your support. You've helped us with directing Elders Igniting, many more stories to tell, and
Yeah.
also behind the scenes, you've helped us with moderation and getting ourselves set up to continue to fly. So tell us more about how did you get involved with the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop?
Well, it all happened at Coca-Cola. Now, how did you get here? Well, it was a 57 Chevy that I got there. That's the old joke from vaudeville. But anyway, in my last year, I left my own theater company, Just Us. And it happened because my mentor came to me one day after I had liberated the theater company, Just Us, from Theater of the Stars. And we were doing 222, and I wanted to get Marla Gibbs to come to be a guest. She wasn't available. She had reservations about coming to Atlanta at that time because she was working on several projects. I had Michael Pinkney directed. He went to take somebody from New York. Can't think of her name right now, but she was in Chicago, the Broadway Fosse, Chicago, Carol Woods, and hired her to play the lead role, which was Marla Gibbs' role. My mentor, Chris Manis, called me up while we were in rehearsal, about to go into rehearsal. And he says, Byron, I got good news and I got bad news. I said, well, great, because that's the kind of relationship we have. He said, the good news is I just signed Savion Glover to do Tap Dance Kid. I said, wonderful. I said, congratulations. Of course, my antenna is up at that point because I'm thinking, wow, I'm the Black Theater Company. That should be the show that I buy. But of course, I don't have the liquidity that Theater of the Stars had because, and the relationship with the Schuberts and the Nederlanders and the such. And I said, well, what's the bad news? He said, well, the bad news is we're going to play on the same date of your show. Now, mind you, Just Us Theater was one of several Black theaters in Atlanta, Georgia. We had New Cosmos with Walter Dallas. We had Proposition was Walter Dallas. New Cosmos, Eddie Billups and Joan Lewis, and I mean Just Us and Jamandi. But you know one thing that we had all agreed upon as African American arts organizations? We would never play a show on the same date your show was running. We refuse to be the split of the diaspora of the economic wealth of the African American community for its entertainment dollars and disposable income to be choosing one over the other, but not the white theaters. They got to realizing that because Just Us was succeeding, oh, now we're going to start doing black theater plays during Black History Month. Or I can go and bring in the Alvin Haley when obviously if Byron had a chance and had the money to buy these shows, wouldn't it be right for him and Just Us to be the producers of these shows? Absolutely. And so I began to challenge all of this. Ultimately, because I was challenging the status quo is when that became a reality check for me. And I realized if I'm going to succeed, I need more than just crumbs from the table. The central business district in every city that has a major African American community needs to have its performing arts arena in that area. Peachtree Street from Five Points to North Avenue, or Fox, where the Fox is, the Lions Theater. That's the corridor. I was on that block with my shows in a 714 seat opera house. And then they began to usurp my right to these my own cultural communities arts excellence by buying it and keeping me from getting access to it. You cannot sustain running an organization of several $100,000 every year that you got to raise from zero. We're out an endowment. Everybody else has an endowment. The Alliance Theater has an endowment. So if their years go bad, their endowment saves them. But if we go bad, we're in the hole for another trying to stay alive and not having the access to funds to help secure a growing institution. And principally because the violation of contract law set up by the federal government and co-signed by every state in this country. So if you're wondering why you do not have a major cultural arts community center in your central business district, it's because there's been contract violations all up and down, and it ain't got nothing to do with your art. It's about political capital and respect of the arts community's dollar. So I left.
Mhm.
My last job was with Coca-Cola Bottling Company, where I needed to make some money to keep sustaining my condominium and my wife and whatever. And you know what I was doing? Hmm. I was riding on the trucks with the delivery people who you go by a gasoline station and see all those Coca-Cola products out on there. Trust me, that's what I was doing. And little me, that 125, 130-pound guy, these guys are stevedores who take a full case of Cokes and toss it from one room side of the room to the other. And you're supposed to catch that and then stack it up in the gasoline station. By the end of the first day, I had black and blue marks all up and down my chest from, from, from trying to catch this stuff. And I
Man.
said, I can't do this. I
Mhm.
can't do this. And so I saw where the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop was looking for a director. Karen Baxter had been the director, and I interviewed for the position, and
You
I
got
got it. Interestingly enough, my sister, who was in Dallas, was working with Girl Scouts down there, but Girl Scouts USA brought her to New York to work with the corporate organization. Now, this is very important because when I tell you about my family of excellence, my sister is one of in 2005 is one of 2,000 women who was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize based on conflict resolution. She was one of who was nominated. Of course, she didn't win, but she was working at Girl Scouts USA. She helped to co-design the current signature piece of Girl Scouts logo. So we got to New York principally about at the same time. They said, "Well, let's be roommates."
Mm.
And then for the 2 years that I was there, one of the things that impacted me was working at Frank Silvera Writers Workshop, which was on 125th Street, St. Nicholas, right off of St. Nicholas, in a tennis shoe store above the tennis shoe store. That's where the workshop existed. 3 flights of steps up. We had a coal burning stove in the office. It could seat maybe 40 people in the small space that we had for the readings. But what I realized was that where were all the dynamic Black theater productions originating, and they originated at the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop, which made it iconic. So my running Just Us Theater, 714-seat opera house, thank you for that lovely visual that you're giving behind me, because I love an opera house, with the box seats and the elegance, to running a workshop with 40 seats above a tennis shoe store, but creating and continuing to produce the African American theatrical classics that I, as a theater producer, would come to New York to purchase to bring back to Atlanta, where I was able to meet and work with Ozzy and Ruby and Anthony Chisholm. They were there on those Mondays for those readings. And that became another rationale of my understanding the blessing that I've been given to run an organization. We succeeded. We won an Obie award on my watch for playwriting development. And so I take that with me, and because it's not because we were doing anything extra, it's the fact that finally the organization itself, the institution, the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop, had established itself to be acknowledged by Obie Award, to be acknowledged by the Broadway community, to understand that every show that was in one of those major theaters in the city, off Broadway, on Broadway, off Broadway, came through the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. And so it was an honor to have met and worked on behalf with Garland Sr., and then creating a relationship outside of the theater with Garland with mutual respect. So when I left the workshop to run the Queens Historical Society, creating and protecting the history of the 2.5 million people of the borough of Queens, New York City. I'm the only African American male or female who's ever run a major historical society in the city of New York. And I take that with honor and pride because I knew nothing of New York's history. And so working with them, I was able to be on the board of directors of the Louis Armstrong House Museum. I was able to be on the board of the Louis Latimer House, who created the carbon filament and helped to sustain it and refurbish it, and winning and receiving applause from the preservation community because of the work that I was doing at the workshop. And then, or at the Historical Society. But it was proving that it wasn't about working and succeeding in a Black organization, but succeeding because of what I was able to accomplish as an arts administrator and understanding the dynamics of the arts business. To this day, every step, every job, everything that I've ever had in my journey of my 50 plus years of being in the business, I've always attempted to bring my cultural commitment to my people to a level of creating, even for the Historical Society, making sure that its archival collection was taking African American history stories and putting it into the archival collection. Because when we talk about book banning, and you really want to know why there's no story about your culture in the books, is because when they write the books, they go to the historical societies to get the information that's in their archival collection to then put it into a book. But if your story is not in that collection, you don't even get recognized.
Right. And we're here with Byron C. Saunders, and we're covering a lot of ground, race, the arts, all kinds of great stuff. Thank you so much for being here and for telling us your story. I do want to just talk about the workshop and the work that you've done with
Yes.
us and continue to do. Your latest work was with Elders Igniting, Many More Stories to Tell. Since the workshop has gone virtual, we've been able to reach global audiences. So tell us more about your work with Elders Igniting and give our
Oh,
listeners
well,
just those plot lines.
the plot lines, and they're thick. Trust me, the plot lines are so thick. Even I'm amazed at how all of it has come together. And speaking with Dr. Lydell this morning and acknowledging how the journey actually began to elders. Janice Lydell, Dr. Lydell, Clark Atlanta University, brilliant writer. Now, mind you, I have to say this about the theater company I ran, Just Us Theater. Pearl Clegg, the writer, Pearl Clegg, was my playwright in residence at Just Us. I directed all of her shows, not Kenny Leon. I directed those shows and gave her the status of being recognized, which is great. But Janice Lydell, she's living in Atlanta, Clark University, English professor, came to me several years ago, and I don't even know how we actually met. At this point, it's about we did The Talk at the Billie Holiday Theater. I think that was the first play that she introduced me to. And what she wrote was a story about how do we tell our children and our sons and daughters about racism. The Talk. You know what I'm talking about. That talk. That's right. That talk about racism in our country. And of course, being a writer from Atlanta, her whole concept of the storyline based in Atlanta was almost similarly more about Atlanta's politics and its own story and how the people of Atlanta, both the poor, the wealthy, and the middle class, were all and continue to be all a part of this civil rights story. And so she wrote it, and we did it at the Billie Holiday Theater as part of the reading series. And we had it filmed, and it was unique that the relationship with both the workshop was ongoing because by then, the 8 years, 9 years that I ran either the workshop or the Historical Society, I actually moved back to Atlanta and then came back to New York to run the White Call Farmhouse Museum. And it was in that time period, my second trip back to New York, that I began to work with Garland Jr. because as I remember when Garland Sr. was failing in health, it really was painful because I had befriended and became a good friend to Garland Sr. And I'll never forget this because I remember we had a Harlem Arts Alliance meeting at the Riverside Church where I was box office manager. And I saw Garland Sr. come in and he was so bent over. And I knew he was in pain. I knew it was something really physically and anything else in his world was calling attention to me. And I asked him, was he okay? And I made sure he got in. And then I immediately called his son. I said, Garland, your dad needs you. I'm a believer in institutional development. I'm a believer in making sure that our established institutions can sustain themselves. And because of my personal commitment to that ethics in my own MO, that I felt a moral responsibility to the legacy of an institution that I was a part of, to see its origins, to work, have had the party with at Gretchen Cryers, where Morgan Freeman and Alfred Urey come to the party, working with James Briggs Murray and the board of directors. I came to appreciate the effort that they have been given for the years that this institution has sustained itself. So it was very easy for me to get on the phone annually, literally, about every January, February, and have a conversation with Garland Jr. and say, what is the workshop doing this year? How can I be of assistance? Let me know what we can do. I got a couple shows I'd like to bring to this workshop series. That was fine. But along the way, journey to help the institution sustain and survive itself. So when Janice Lydell, Dr. Lydell, asked me to get involved with her project, The Talk, I immediately said, well, Garland, how do we get a chance to do this for the workshop's reading series? And he shared with me that we could put it in, and we actually did it the weekend of Martin Luther King celebration at the Billie Holiday Theater, the reading of The Talk. And we filmed it, and realizing at that point, my relationship with Dr. Lydell had succeeded and exceeded her expectations, having had her play Who Will Sing for Lena about the Lena Baker story, first woman to and only woman, black woman, to be electrocuted in the state of Georgia for having killed her white boss, her employer, because he tried to rape her. And she was later exonerated. But Janice's show was like convincing me her work was just as important as Pearl Clegg's, if and on the same level. And so from there, our relationship grew because I was her dramaturg, I was her director, and I was using all the elements that I learned from the Obie award-winning playwriting development company called Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. And then I realized that because of my relationship was to bring it to the table and continue to be a consultant for the workshop, kind of an advisor to see it grow and really making sure that Garland knew he had somebody on the East Coast while he was on the West Coast that was working with him or on behalf for him. And of course, when it was really magnificent that when Garland Sr. did pass and we had his going home celebration in New York, the opportunity to share some of these stories with everybody who knew Garland Sr., but perhaps did not know the journey of the workshop itself. And so when it came down to Janice and I working on several other projects that she's asked me to be a dramaturg, I said, sure, I love working with you. So then she calls me up, a year ago. And she says, well, what would you think about a show about senior citizens? I said, Janice, go ahead and write it. Just write it. You had me at hello. I'm your dramaturg, so I will work at it. She had somebody that she wanted local to direct it, and he wasn't able to direct or didn't want to direct it for whatever the cause was. So she pitched it back to me. I said, Janice, I've been waiting for you. Why didn't you ask me the first time? So, but the challenge was this: three one-act plays, a farce written in the style of commedia dell'arte by Carlton Millett and his wife. Carlton and his wife, Barbara, were, when I first met them, the co-chairs of the Spelman University drama department. They were the ones who taught Sam Jackson and LaTanya Richardson, who, by the way, were two of the actors in Atlanta, along with Bill Nunn and several others who started Just Us Theater. So my relationship with Sam and LaTanya and Bill Nunn had already been established because we're all friends. And so when Janice said, Byron, about this new piece, I said, okay, I can do it. And I realized not just that Carlton and Barbara Millett's show was one that was really exceptionally written, commanded and demanded artists who could understand it. And then to write the second piece that she had in this three show series was written by Jamil El Shahir, who, interestingly enough, when my kids were young, I'm not talking about 7, 8, 9, 10, played with his son. Okay, now my gut boys are 27 and 25 now. So we're talking about a relationship that goes way back. And he wrote a piece called Dying Well, which is so exceptional about that moment we're transitioning. And if you get to be a certain age, and I'm sure in our communities, many of us have had to be caregivers. Now, what does that really mean? You stop being yourself to give care to an elder or someone in your family who has entrusted you with their lives, and each one of my artists in that particular piece, three characters, as was the other one, but they each had recently had a caregiving situation in which they saw and helped to transition. My own mother-in-law succumbed 6 weeks before her 98th birthday, though my wife and I were her caregivers, my wife for 10 years and me for 4 years, but learning how to handle a very sensitive situation, issue in every family, being a caregiver. That's what that story is about, and about transitioning and how we as families and members of the family can accept or assist the transition from one life to the end of life. And then the last piece written by Dr. Janice Lydell was Senior Prom. And When she asked me about senior prom the first time, I said, "Janice, ooh, I like that idea. A senior prom for those seniors who didn't get a chance to go to their senior prom because they were unable to go in 1963 in the height of the civil rights movement." And the base of the story was a woman who is 77 years old, who lived in Birmingham, Alabama, the most segregated, hated town city in the United States in 1963, where the Children's March began on May the 3rd, the same Birmingham where the church bombing was that fall in September. Write a story about a woman who didn't get a chance to go to her senior prom because the white establishment canceled all of those activities for the black community because they were involved in the civil rights movement. Y'all remember Bull Connor. Y'all remember the dogs. And if you haven't seen it, go back and watch Eyes on the Prize because that's exactly the story right there. Now imagine that was my visual in 1963 watching Walter Cronkite and ABC, CBS, and NBC, because we only had three television stations back then, where they were showing me, a 13-year-old child, young man, who was watching that moment where children were marching and they sicked the dogs on them, sprayed them with hoses. Why? Because they wanted to have equal initiatives, equal education, voting rights. Imagine they left their schools during the day to participate in a civil rights march that became the iconic visual on TV in 1963, which motivated me even more because in her story, that's the story she's telling about why she didn't go to her senior prom and how it was canceled and how the other white communities were celebrating their being able to go to a prom and such. So then the story is the 77-year-old woman now living in Atlanta, Georgia, is taking care of her grandkids who are 32 and 28, who were parents were tragically killed in a car accident, and she helped to raise them. But she's getting a chance to tell them the story that we sometimes in our community, a story of a civil rights story that we sometimes refuse to tell over and over because of the pain. It's like right now, today is May 30th, tomorrow, May 31st, 1921. Why is that an important year? Because that was the year the Tulsa race riots took place, where Black Wall Street was literally destroyed by white supremacists and racism. They dropped bombs on the black community, which was the richest black community in this country. 1921. And if that story is not resonating in your history classes right now, it's a God unforgiven shame that you have not learned about that particular incident because that's when our hopes, our dreams of a society, a world where we could grow up and learn and live and be respected. The richest black community in this country was not New York City, Harlem, was not Washington, D.C. It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Why? Oh, you know about Flowers of the Moon, whatever the story is about the Osage Indians, same story. Because oil was on the grounds, under the grounds where our black community was living. And if you know the Trail of Tears story, where did they leave? My Cherokee Nation people, me, part Cherokee, driven from the East Coast in Carolina to relocate to Oklahoma, and where they gave those African people moving in that direction, gave them smallpox infected blankets. Y'all need to know these stories. This is why do we need to write a new Disney story when we have our own stories to tell? And if you don't know these stories, it's the reason why I, as an arts administrator, an artist, a director, a dramaturg, have made that commitment to make sure our stories are told and given respect. We did it as live theater in Atlanta, Georgia, and the workshop gave us the opportunity to showcase three stories. The leading agency for readers theater in this country is Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. This is why it's important. So my work with the workshop as now as a consultant and advisor to bring us and rebrand us into the 21st century because institutionally, we have to keep making sure our own institutions are telling our stories, not depending on other organizations, which might do a good job. But the origin of the story starts with us. And if
100%.
not us, who else is going to tell our story but us? And this is
100%.
why it's why it's so important and why the success of what we were able to accomplish is that opportunity to do the workshop reading. And I would tell Janice every time we post, put in the workshop's logo, put in the logo of the theater company, because we built person by person to fill a house of 100 plus seats every show. We succeeded. We didn't have marketing dollars. We had Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. We didn't have PR dollars. We had Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. We had Zoomcatchers allowing us to do these three productions for an audience to see, as Garland Sr. would say, to show how to do from page to the stage. And we proved it would work. Not only that, we had capacity houses every night. We
And
averaged more than 100
amazing.
people, which is amazing.
Yeah,
And
congratulations for that.
we got no reviews. I said, Janice, there's a story in the Atlanta Daily World, hopefully this week, but it's after the show. You, as a producer, Janice, brought three shows into the Atlanta Arts Exchange, which was a converted elementary school to a cultural arts center run by African Americans, Alice Lovelace and Iban Dooley, who I've known for 40 years. So my coming back home to Atlanta was to work in a facility of friends that I've known, and we packed the house. Each of those three shows had, and we were planning for about 100 people per show. We were averaged over 100 people for each night. We had 150 people the first show,
And we also had
and
the virtual reading was well attended,
the-
and the link is in the
exactly.
description. You can watch the video. It was really a great reading, and hats off to everyone who participated in that. And congratulations for all the success with that. And hopefully, we'll get a chance to see it again somewhere on the stage. Huh?
We did have it filmed. I had industry people at the theater who came to see the show. My connections being on the film commission for 7 years. I can't ask for much more.
That's
You
great.
can't, if you're going to open the door, my friends, knock the door off the hinges.
Mhm. And provide opportunities for people coming up. Mhm.
Exactly. The box office, the set, the lighting, the capacity to work with the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. I mean, literally realize our community commands and demands the respect and the excellence that you get from any place else. You don't have to be Disney. You don't have to be Pixar. You don't have to be George Lucas or Spielberg, but you can be yourself. You can be yourself and bring your game, bring your A game to the table. And I guarantee you, you will rise above every expectation and even exceed it because you did it the right way. Don't
Great.
sell your soul for 30 pieces of silver. Do it because your people, our people, need you as a griot to keep telling our story and be honest and tell the truth because unless you do it, nobody else will.
Thank you so much for that. Take note, everyone. We're here with Byron C. Saunders. We're talking about all kinds of things in the arts, conversations on aging. I do want to ask you, now that you have several decades of experience underneath you, what would your older self tell your younger self if you could do that?
Okay, I tell it like this. I have two boys. When they were coming of age, let's say 10, 12, every year, and it wasn't easy, raising them because their mother and I fell out of uh, what happens in marriages. But we raised and put all of our love into our sons. And I told them that at each year, I said, if you just stay on the track that you are right now, and this is them understanding who I am and as their father, having had and continuing to have a very successful career in the arts and everything that I've done. They've been a witness, and I made sure that they were with me along each one of those steps on the ladder so that they could understand it's theirs to have and to they could do the same things. And I said, but guess what, sons? You're way past where I was at your age. And if you just stay on the track that you are on right now, you will far exceed my expectations and your own expectations of greatness. It's in you, but you have to have the courage and to be honest with yourself about your choice and your passion. And if you once you realize what it is you want, like my son wants to be a pilot, he's building jet planes for Gulfstream right now. He's a staff sergeant in the Air Force National Reserve, and he's been flying since he was 13 years old. He's got his certificate. He's been flying gliders, and he wants to be a commercial pilot. So he's about to start working with Delta in a week or so. And my youngest son is a chef. He is a private, personal, and corporate chef. And he's been cooking since he was 8, 9, and 10. His moniker is he's known as the kitchen magician. Brandon, the kitchen magician. So this is what you have to realize about your not just about yourself, but if you're going to be the best you that you can be, and if you have kids or you don't have kids, mentor somebody to share and pass the baton of the best of you to be the best of them so they can be a better person and a better world. That's how we're going to be able to overcome all the isms that are out there.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. We're getting to the bottom of this conversation. Really appreciate you being on. I do want to ask you, though, just to continue with the
Yeah.
topic of pro aging content, because I think the Elders
Yes.
Igniting was pro aging content. What do you see as the trends for that, and what type of advice would you have for producers and other people in the field as far as producing more content in that vein?
First and foremost, don't be afraid to tell a story that hasn't been told. You see, it's interesting to me as a producer, how many Superfly stories have we seen? How many Godfather stories have we seen? How many stories of fantasy from an African American perspective have you seen? I'm gonna ask you that question because as part of the diaspora, if you're remaking somebody else's story, it's really not your story. It is if you make it your part of your story. But the creative part of the imagination, the greatest nation in the world is right here. The imagination, not the one with all the superpowers. We're talking about what's up here. What's in here? Your heart, your spirit, your soul. And if you really want to make sure your story and our story, the village that you come from story, is put into the perspective of the universe where it's supposed to be, then you are the one who has to develop it. Now, that's as a producer. As a writer, tell the truth. Even for the producer, produce the truth. But if you're the writer, tell the story from the perspective of truth. My father used to say there's three sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth. Tell the truth. As an actor, then be on stage. Don't fake the funk because everybody's sitting there watching you. See those seats out there? See those seats up in the balcony? They're watching you on stage, and it may be only you that catches their eye. And if you're not being true to the character on the stage that's in front of them, where we are, they will know that you're faking it. You have much more obligation to bring the story's truth to life by being the truth. And if you're doing that, guess what? It won't matter if you win the Academy or the Obie or the Tony or whatever award that's there, because the award is at the end and the standing ovation. That's your reward. And guess what? You only got one day to celebrate that victory because the next day you got to be even better than the day that you were before. And if you bring that to the stage as a producer, actor, director, stage manager, costumer, set designer, set builder, light design, and I think even AI designer, because we got a lot of stuff on AI right now. You will realize that it's still about telling the truth.
Absolutely. And then to continue to talk about truth and, because I know there's still a lot of seniors out there that are in the arts, people, on that edge of, "Should I keep going? Should I retire?" What advice would you have for specifically for seniors that are still in the arts?
The seniors that are still in the arts, the most powerful weapon in the universe is love. We came in with love, and hopefully you exit with love. You're being a part of the bigger picture. You are not the picture. Okay. It's not your picture alone. And believe me, when you begin to realize that as a senior, because you get respect, you give respect, and your family will respect you even more because when they seek truth and wisdom, they don't ever go to a baby and say, "Can you tell me how to cure what's
Mm,
ailing me?" They go to a person who's lived a life,
right.
someone whose experiences are able to share with you where the pitfalls are so that when you do find yourself in a stumbling block and trying to overcome it, you'll probably be able to leap over it, walk behind it, and kick it off the side of the road so somebody else won't fall into the same pit that you did.
So is that your
That's what
advice to the seniors who are
advice, yeah.
trying to continue
Teacher,
continue in the
yes.
arts? Mhm. Keep
Continue in the
going.
arts because you're not they shoot horses, but they don't shoot actors. You know where actors go? We do commercials.
Golf courses and,
That's right, for
medications, right?
golf courses and medications, and even you can get paid in New York. You could get paid in New York healthcare privileges by sharing your art with their patients.
Mhm.
Imagine that. You're paying all this out of your pocket for healthcare, but you can get healthcare in a specific system that says, if you come and read to these young kids in the pediatrics ward, we will trade some healthcare for your being able to be a part of this.
So you hear that all the act is this New York you said all the
New
act
York, this is a maybe, and literally because at the point at which there are 8.5 million people in New York City, guess what? There are 8 million of them are actors. And they're all trying to do the same thing you're doing. Yeah, and
Mm.
the reality is that if you are able to still give to your community, guess what? Your community can give back to you to appreciate your being wise,
Mhm.
for being able to share and mentor, keeping people out of the hospital who unfortunately have made bad health choices. But if
Or had
you're
an
the
accident or something,
had an accident, that's
right?
right. So, I mean, you in somewhat ways, if you're a blessing, be a blessing.
Mhm.
Give
Great.
somebody a blessing. Make sure that they and don't look for the pat on the back. That's not why you
And
do
the
it.
pat on the back is best when it just naturally
Exactly.
happens. That's been my
Exactly.
experience. Great.
Working for the award, good luck. Good luck. Because even after you receive the award, it's like after the success of what we just created in Atlanta, 2 days later, I gotta realize, "Okay, I got a sh I got a show in New York in 3 weeks. I gotta get myself ready for this."
And that's
One
the perfect segue for what's coming up next for Brian. I'm gonna talk about the National Black Theater Festival and your next show. So what's coming up?
Oh my god. See what I'm saying? It's like, just when you thought you could sit back and relax, forget that, because the success only spreads to the next level in which somebody says, "Well, I'm living in Winston-Salem. I'm working with the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop. They are a critical part of the 44th anniversary of the International Black Theater Festival, in which Garland Sr. created the opportunity that's followed up by Garland Jr. to do a play reading series at the festival. So I'm excited about the 50th anniversary of the International Frank Silvera Writers Workshop to work with the 44th anniversary of the International Black Theater Festival in Winston-Salem 2024. Be there or be square, because this year is holy ground. This is what the International Black Theater Festival has defined itself, not just because it's international. And look at what the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop has done for its 50th anniversary. Our selections of plays have been about the global community. The plays themselves, the technology that's being used, the green screen projections, that wonderful theater that I'm sitting in. Thank you, wherever I am. I am ready for my close-up, Mr.
Are you
DeMille.
ready for your close-up,
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Saunders?
truly, truly, yeah, so, but here's where this comes as truth and reality. Come to Winston-Salem. Be a part of the celebration of our culture. It is, as I said, they identified Winston-Salem as holy ground. Not every city can declare themselves that, and that's most unusual. I was at the branding ceremony for the International Black Theater Festival based because of the North Carolina Black Repertory Theater Company, which is the sponsor of the Black Theater Festival, for which Frank Silvera Writers Workshop is a partner in that festival. And so celebrating Black theater, not just from the past, but its future. And that's what the workshop is all about right now, looking into the globe and saying, oh, tell me the future, show me the bright lights of wisdom and truth. And it's in what we're doing like right now, Zoomcatchers. You don't even have to do that. You can QR code it. Just go to the FSW.org. And guess what? You're going to be led right to that place where you can make that donation. Make it real. Please
Absolutely.
understand this is how we're going to be able to keep our institutions alive, keep it from being roadkill because they don't want us to succeed. Make no mistake about it. Every theater company in this country is using the profile for which we helped to establish, and it works.
Mhm.
So don't let them be the only one that you support.
Absolutely.
Continue to support the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop, continue to support Garland Jr., and to continue to support Kimberly Gunn with Zoomcatchers because they're the ones who are helping to move this ball forward where somebody like me, who was a part of the engine before, is still part of the engine. We're just retooling it. Thank you for taking the time. I saw you right there. Yes, you were the one who just picked up that phone. I know you're on your computer. Say
The link will be in the
thefsw.org.
links will be in the description.
Of course it will be.
Absolutely. And thank you
And
so much for that.
you got to do it with fun in your heart too. Passion is what you go bring here, but you better enjoy what you're viewing. Because if you're not having fun and you don't enjoy it, that's okay. Find something else that will. But I guarantee if you lock into this and what Zoom Catchers is doing and what the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop and all the other companies and good-hearted people that are out there are more of us than the others. So let's get
100%.
together. Let's do this
Let's do it together. And what
together.
remind me, what are the dates for the National Black Theater Festival?
The last week of July, first week of August. It's
Great.
all of 1 week.
Great.
There's a real Wakanda, and it's called Winston-Salem.
Get your tickets.
Come
Get there.
on.
This year, the Garland Senior Writers Workshop, the series they'll be hosting, I think it's over 30 plays. So there'll be a lot of
Yes.
great new work so you
Yes.
can go check out. You can meet Garland Jr. and Byron. They'll be there. Hopefully, I'll be there too.
You better
I'll
be.
say that. We're getting to the bottom of this conversation, but before we
Yes.
head out, I do want to ask you just what you like to do for fun. I know you love to cook. I know that's something we've got several things in common. Tell us more about things you like to do
My
for fun.
okay. I love sports. I tried to play all the sports I could possibly play. Football, I learned was one of my first sports that learned how to play because my dad played football in high school and then a little bit in college at Tennessee State. But I was too small to match the poundage and the weight of these guys who are like 300 pounds. I'm still 135 at my fighting weight. Okay. So I do love sports. I love the golf, bowling, football, basketball, not so much because I couldn't shoot that well, but I love to play the game anyway. Tennis, I wanted to hit it over the net, over the fence. So I'm not so sure I'm ready for pickleball, although my wife and I have a pickleball set. We haven't tried that yet, but why not? What the heck? So, you know,
I know it's
but
trending. I haven't tried
it's
either.
trending. It's trending. But I do love to cook. I love good food. I love to dance. I love hand dancing. I love ballroom dancing. I love the art of the art. And then, of course, theater, that's my profession, but I love a good story. I love to hear a good story woven and told and given life on stage and screen and pictures and whatever. And then, of course, the best job I've ever had, the one that really is the one that I love the most is being a father to my two
Mm,
sons. The
great.
love that I've been able to share with them and being a grandparent now and watching them grow and enjoying the beauty of life. And I love flowers. The God's infinite beauty design in floral arrangements is just,
Remarkable.
it is.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And we've been here with Byron C. Saunders. We've covered a lot of ground. Really appreciate you sharing your life, the details of your journey. It's been quite a long journey, quite a storied journey that you've had. And we really, really appreciate you being on. And I know you got a production coming up in the Big Apple. So tell us about
Before
that.
we head out, oh yes, you know, there's a line in Godfather 3 that just that's significant, and I'm sure every actor knows this. Every time I try to escape, they just keep pulling me back
The
in.
long
You know,
goodbye.
right, right. So, Superheroes and Other Men, written by Jeff Oppenheim, produced by Alibe Hamaker and Sweet 24, K, and Veronica Caicedo of Teatro Circular, which is in the east side of New York in the Village, right next to La Mama, June 12th to the 16th. I'll be there on the 10th. It's a one-man show about the rites of passage of a young man to from childhood to fatherhood. And once we get to that bottom line, and at the end of the story, the triumph of realizing the birth of his own child, he finds the superhero in himself. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. It's another part of the Byron C. Saunders journey and
Right.
experience as
Another chapter, huh?
another chapter. So it seems like the book is still being written, thank goodness. And I really appreciate everybody who's been a part of the journey. Thank you for being a part of my spiritual journey and my political and professional journey as well. And I'm awfully glad to be able to share it with you today and for tomorrow as well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to close out. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy, you have a lot going on, but there's obviously a lot to talk about.
Yes, it
Touched on a
is.
lot, covered a lot of material. So,
Winston-Salem, Winston-Salem, don't forget, July, the last week of July, first week of August, be there or be square because this is an important year for truth to be revealed to all of us and around the world. Let's be
absolutely.
part of the story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again, Byron Saunders,
Yeah.
and we'll see you next time.